"Don't touch anything, the maid can wait outside." My own daughter spoke these words as she guided her wealthy in-laws into the house. I'd spent 20 years cleaning for her. Everyone stared, my hands were shaking. Then my husband whispered, "She told them you work for her." I replied, "Not anymore." That was the moment I finally understood. I had raised a daughter who was ashamed of where she came from and, more importantly, ashamed of me. If this story makes your heart ache, please like, follow, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that dignity can't be measured by social status. Trust me, you'll want to know how this ends. My name is Gloria Williams. I'm 67 years old now. But this story begins 20 years ago when my daughter Vanessa graduated. From the prestigious law school I'd worked 3 jobs to help her afford. I still remember how my chest swelled with pride as she walked across that stage in her cap and gown. The first in our family to earn a professional degree. The culmination of generations of sacrifice and hope. What I didn't realize then was that her achievement would also mark the beginning of a painful drift between us, one that would eventually expose a gulf I never imagined could exist between mother and daughter. Vanessa had always been brilliant and ambitious. As a single mother raising her after her father left when she was just 2, I poured everything into giving her opportunities I never had. My own education had stopped after high school, but I was determined that wouldn't be her story. I worked as a hospital custodian during the day, waitressed evenings, and on weekends cleaned houses in the affluent neighborhoods across town. "Mom, why do you clean other people's houses?" she asked me once when she was about 9, after a classmate had seen me working at their home, and mentioned it at school. "Because it pays well enough that I can put money aside for your college," I told her honestly. "And because there's nothing wrong with honest work that helps others." She seemed to accept this then, but as she moved into her teenage years, I noticed her reluctance to have friends over to our modest apartment. The way she'd introduce me vaguely as Gloria instead of my mom. When we ran into her school friends at the mall. Small things that stung but that I brushed off as teenage embarrassment. When she earned a scholarship to college, I continued working my 3 jobs to help with her expenses, books, and the gap the scholarship didn't cover. During those years, our relationship seemed to strengthen again. She'd call regularly, share stories about her classes, and even bring laundry home on breaks, normal college kid behavior that made me feel needed. Law school followed, and though the scholarship money wasn't as generous, I was ready. I'd saved for years, living frugally and picking up extra cleaning jobs whenever possible. My hands were perpetually raw from cleaning products, my back chronically ached, but watching her succeed made every sacrifice worthwhile. It was during law school that Vanessa met Charles, her future husband, handsome, polished, from a family with old money and older connections. The first time she brought him to meet me, I noticed how she nervously glanced around our apartment, seeing it suddenly through his eyes: the worn furniture, the cramped kitchen, the neighborhood that would never be described as desirable. "Your mother is charming," he said afterward in a tone that made clear it wasn't quite a compliment. Vanessa didn't defend me, she just smiled tightly and changed the subject. After graduation, they married in a lavish ceremony that his parents largely paid for. I wore the nicest dress I could afford and tried to blend in with the designer gowns and expertly tailored suits. During the reception, Charles's mother asked what I did for a living. "I work in building maintenance," I said, the euphemism feeling hollow even as I spoke it. "How interesting," she replied in a way that suggested it was anything but. "And Vanessa's father? What does he do?" "He hasn't been in the picture since she was very young," I explained. I raised her myself. A look of something like pity crossed her face before she excused herself. Later, I overheard her telling another guest how inspiring it was that Vanessa had overcome such humble beginnings after the wedding. Vanessa and Charles bought a sprawling house in an exclusive neighborhood, the kind where I had once cleaned other people's homes. When I visited for the first time, I couldn't help but notice how much it resembled the Hanson house, one of my regular cleaning clients from years ago. The same open-concept kitchen with marble countertops, the same floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking carefully manicured gardens. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I told her, genuinely happy for her success. "You've worked so hard for this." "Thanks, Mom," she said, but there was a tension in her voice. "Just try not to touch too much. Everything's new and we're still getting settled." It was the first of many subtle wounds. When I offered to help clean up after dinner, she quickly declined. When I suggested coming over weekly to help maintain the large house, she laughed nervously. "Oh, we have a service for that," she said. "Charles insists," yet somehow within months, I found myself exactly in that role, not officially employed, but regularly helping out. It began innocently enough with me watching their dog while they traveled. Then it became watering plants while they were gone, which evolved into "would you mind tidying up a bit while you're there?" Soon, I was coming over twice a week to clean while Vanessa was at work. She'd leave notes. Bathrooms need attention, or could you get to the baseboards this time? Always with cash left on the counter, not a formal payment, she insisted, just gas money or lunch funds. I told myself I was simply helping my busy daughter, that this was what mothers did. But deep down, I knew what was happening. The woman who had cleaned houses to put her daughter through law school was now cleaning her daughter's house, only now with the pretense that it was just mom being mom. My husband Jerome, whom I'd married when Vanessa was in college, saw it more clearly than I did. "Gloria, you're not her maid," he would say. "You're her mother. There's a difference. She's just busy with her career." I'd defend her. "This is something I can do to make her life easier." But Jerome wasn't convinced. "Have you noticed? She never introduces you to her new friends, or invites us when they entertain." I had noticed. Of course. The way our visits were always scheduled when they had no other plans. How I'd sometimes arrive to clean, and find evidence of dinner parties I hadn't known about. Wine glasses still in the sink. Napkins bearing the monogram of their last name, a name that wasn't mine. Still, nothing prepared me for that fateful Sunday afternoon when everything finally became unmistakably clear. It was Charles's parents' anniversary, and they were stopping by before their celebration dinner. Vanessa had asked if I could come early to make sure everything was perfect. I'd spent the morning polishing, dusting, and arranging fresh flowers, taking special care with the guest bathroom their in-laws would use. I was just finishing when I heard cars pulling into the driveway. Vanessa came rushing in, elegant in a blue dress I'd never seen. "Mom, they're here early," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. Would you mind?" Before she could finish, the front door opened and Charles was ushering in his parents. That's when she said it. "Don't touch anything, the maid can wait outside." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen, feather duster still in hand, as her mother-in-law's eyes swept over me. "Actually," Charles's mother said, "we've met before at the wedding. You're Vanessa's, she helps us around the house." Vanessa interrupted quickly. "Gloria's been with us for years." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Charles looking uncomfortable, his father checking his watch impatiently, his mother's confusion slowly giving way to understanding. And beside me, Jerome, who had come to help move some heavy planters, whispered in my ear, "She told them you work for her. 20 years of sacrifice. 20 years of pride in her accomplishments. 20 years of telling myself that her success was worth every backache, every raw hand, every missed opportunity of my own." And in a single moment, I understood that to my daughter, I was just a help and uncomfortable reminder of origins she'd rather forget. "Not anymore," I said, setting down the duster with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. If you're as hurt by this betrayal as I was in that moment, like this video and follow for the next part, where you'll see how this confrontation unfolded and the painful truth I finally had to face about the daughter I'd given everything to raise. Because sometimes the people we sacrifice the most for are the ones who most take that sacrifice for granted. The silence that followed my two words, "not anymore," seemed to stretch into eternity. Vanessa's face drained of color, her perfect makeup suddenly stark against her pallor. Charles's parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Jerome placed his hand gently on my lower back, a silent gesture of support I desperately needed to remain standing. "Mom," Vanessa finally managed, her voice a strangled whisper, "you're making a scene." "A scene," I repeated, almost wondering if I'd heard her correctly. "I'm making a scene by existing. By being your mother instead of your maid." Charles stepped forward, always a diplomat. "Why don't we all sit down and—" "No. Thank you," I interrupted, finding strength in the decades of dignity I'd maintained through every back-breaking job. "Jerome and I will be leaving. I think you have some explaining to do to your in-laws, Vanessa. Though I'm curious, what exactly did you tell them happened to your mother? Did I die? Move away? Or did I simply disappear when I no longer fit the narrative you wanted to present?" Her mother-in-law, Margaret, looked genuinely distressed. "Vanessa, what is going on? This is your mother?" Before Vanessa could respond with whatever lie she might have concocted, I spoke directly to Margaret. "Yes, I am. I raised Vanessa alone after her father left. I cleaned houses, probably some belonging to your friends, to put her through college and law school. And for the past several years I've been cleaning her house too, though apparently I've been demoted from mother to maid somewhere along the way." "Gloria, please," Vanessa pleaded, her eyes starting between me and her in-laws. "You're misunderstanding." "Am I? Then please, correct me. Tell everyone who I really am to you." The challenge hung in the air between us. I watched my daughter, the little girl I'd once rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose homework I'd checked at midnight after returning from my second job, struggle to find words that wouldn't expose the ugly truth we both now faced. "This is complicated," she finally said. "My mother does help around the house sometimes, yes. I've never denied that she's my mother. But But you've never affirmed it either, I finished for her. Not to your colleagues at the firm. Not to the neighbors who see me coming and going with cleaning supplies for years. Not to your friends who visit while I'm quietly scrubbing your bathrooms. Jerem's grip on my back tightened slightly, grounding me. We should go, Gloria, he murmured. You've said enough. But I hadn't, not nearly. 20 years of silence was spilling out of me, unstoppable as a flash flood. Do you know what I told myself all these years? That you were busy building your career. That helping you was what mothers do. That your success was my success too. Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. I never expected gratitude for the sacrifices I made for you. That's not why parents sacrifice. But I did expect basic respect. I expected you to be proud of where you came from. Not ashamed of it, ashamed of me. Margaret stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable but also seemingly concerned. Vanessa, is this true? Have you been hiding your mother's identity? Charles intervened, his lawyer's instinct to control damage evident. This is clearly a misunderstanding. A family matter that's gotten out of hand. Perhaps we should reschedule. It's not a misunderstanding, Vanessa suddenly said, her voice so quiet I almost missed it. She looked up, tears streaming down her perfect makeup, creating rivulets of beige and black. It's true. All of it. The admission stunned me into silence. I told people she was a housekeeper, Vanessa continued, now looking directly at her in-laws. I let them assume. I encouraged them to assume she worked for us. Because it was easier than explaining what her father-in-law demanded. Speaking for the first time, that you come from working-class roots? That your mother made an honest living? Vanessa looked at me then, really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in years. It was easier than explaining that I was terrified of not belonging in this world. That every day I walk into that law firm, every dinner party we host, every country club event, I'm waiting for someone to point and say you don't belong here. And Mom, you remind me of that fear. The raw honesty of her words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel though they were, but because beneath them I could still see my little girl, scared of not fitting in, of being judged and found wanting. The same girl who'd hesitated to invite friends over to our small apartment. But she wasn't that little girl anymore. She was a grown woman who had made calculated decisions to erase her own mother. From her narrative, I understand fear. Vanessa, I said quietly. I was afraid every day raising you alone. Afraid I couldn't give you what you needed, afraid I'd fail you. But I never, ever betrayed who I was or where I came from. I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. And I never taught you that there was shame in honest work. That lesson you developed on your own. Jerome and I walked to the door. But I turned back one last time. I won't be coming back to clean your house anymore. If you want to talk, really talk, you know where to find me. The same modest house I've lived in for 30 years. The one you stopped visiting because it wasn't in the right zip code. The drive home passed in weighted silence. Jerome knew better than to offer empty reassurances. When we arrived, I sat at our kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped Vanessa with her homework, where we'd celebrated her acceptance to law school with a cake I'd made after working a double shift and finally let the tears come. I failed her. I whispered to Jerome. Somewhere along the way, I taught her the wrong lessons. Jerome shook his head firmly. No, Gloria. You taught her to work hard, to value education, to reach for more than what she had. She twisted those lessons into something ugly. That's on her, not you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from Vanessa's childhood, searching for the turning point, the moment when ambition had curdled into shame. Had it been when she'd started at the private high school, on scholarship, surrounded by classmates with vacation homes and luxury cars? Or in college, when her roommate had asked what her parents did for a living? Or had it been more gradual, a slow poisoning as she climbed social and professional ladders, each rung taking her further from her roots? My phone rang early the next morning, Vanessa's number. I let it go to voicemail. She tried again an hour later. Then again. Finally, on the fourth call, Jerome gave me a look. You'll have to talk to her eventually. What is there to say? I asked. She made her choice a long time ago, maybe. But you raised her better than to quit when things get hard, he reminded me gently. Don't you think she deserves one more chance to be the daughter you raised her to be? I hesitated, then picked up on the fifth call. Mom, Vanessa's voice cracked. Please don't hang up, please. I'm listening, I said, keeping my voice neutral despite the ache in my chest. I need to see you. To explain. To apologize. Please, I don't need explanations, Vanessa. Your actions have been speaking clearly for years. I just wasn't listening. Then let me apologize properly, face to face. She paused. Not at our house, my house, somewhere neutral. Please, Mom, against my better judgment. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop halfway between our homes the following day. A place neither to upscale nor to modest, truly neutral ground. I arrived early. choosing a table in the corner, where we'd have some privacy. When Vanessa walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the perfectly coiffed lawyer in designer clothes. She wore jeans, a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, vulnerable, more like the daughter I remembered. She slid into the seat across from me, eyes red-rimmed from obvious crying. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. "Charles and I had a huge fight after you left," she finally said. "He said he never knew, never realized what I'd been doing, how I'd been treating you." I doubted that was entirely true. Charles was too observant not to have noticed, but I let it pass. "His parents are furious with me," she continued. "Margaret called me." She stopped herself. "Well, she called me exactly what I deserved to be called." "I didn't come here to discuss your in-laws," I said quietly. Vanessa took a shaky breath. "No, you're right. I'm here to talk about us, about what I did." "Mom, I don't even know where to begin apologizing." "Start by telling me when," I said, the question that had kept me awake. "When did you become ashamed of me?" Her face crumpled. "I was never ashamed of you. I was ashamed of myself." "That doesn't make sense, Vanessa." "It does, though. I was ashamed of not being enough on my own merits, of needing to pretend I came from a different background to be accepted, of being scared all the time that someone would discover I didn't really belong." She wiped at her tears. "When I started at the firm, a partner asked about my family. Before I could answer, another associate joked, 'Her mother probably runs a Fortune 500 company like all of our mothers.' Everyone laughed. And I laughed too. I let them believe it. And that lie became easier to maintain than the truth, I surmised." Vanessa nodded miserably. "Then I met Charles, and his family had all these expectations about lineage and background. By then, the lies were so tangled I couldn't unravel them without exposing myself as a fraud. So instead, you turned your own mother into the help." She flinched at my bluntness but didn't deny it. "Yes, and there's no excuse for that. None." I studied my daughter's face, the face I'd loved from the moment the doctor placed her in my arms. I saw genuine remorse there, but I also saw something else, fear. The same fear that had driven her to deny me in the first place still lingered. "What happens now?" I asked. "If I forgive you, and that's a big if, what changes? Do I suddenly get introduced as your mother at your next dinner party? Do you tell your colleagues the truth? Or do I remain your dirty little secret, just not required to clean your toilets anymore?" Vanessa reached for my hand across the table. I let her take it, feeling the softness of her palm against my work-roughened one. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But I want to try. I need to try, because yesterday, watching you walk out that door, I realized I might have lost the one person who has always been there for me. And no amount of social standing or professional success is worth that." For the first time since the confrontation, I felt something other than pain, a small, tentative flicker of hope. "I can't promise forgiveness yet," I told her honestly, "but I can promise to listen, to give you the chance to show me, not just tell me that you're still the daughter I raised, the one who knows that character matters more than status, that how you treat people is more important than how they can advance your career. If you're wondering if reconciliation is even possible after such deep betrayal, like this video and follow now for the final part of my story, where Vanessa's attempts to make amends reveal just how deeply the rot of shame and status anxiety had penetrated our relationship, and the unexpected way healing finally began. Because sometimes the most painful confrontations are just the beginning of the most important conversations. The weeks following our coffee shop conversation were filled with tentative steps toward reconciliation. Vanessa called regularly, not with the perfunctory check-ins of recent years, but with real conversation. She asked about my day, my friends, the community college art class I'd started taking now that I was officially retired from cleaning houses. She listened in a way she hadn't in decades. But trust, once shattered, doesn't mend easily. Each time my phone rang with her number, I couldn't help but wonder, was this genuine remorse, or simply damage control? Was she truly reconnecting with her mother, or merely assuaging her guilt? Jerome, always my compass when emotions clouded my judgment, encouraged patience. "People don't change overnight, Gloria," he reminded me. "Give her time to show you who she's choosing to be now." A month after our confrontation, Vanessa invited us to dinner at her home, the same home where I'd been dismissed as a maid. I hesitated, but Jerome gently pointed out that avoiding the scene of the crime wouldn't heal the wound. "Besides," he added with a hint of a smile, "I'm curious to see how she keeps the place clean without you." When we arrived, I steeled myself for painful memories, but found the house transformed. Gone were many of the ostentatious decorations and status symbols that had once dominated the space. The atmosphere felt warmer, more lived in, less like a showroom and more like a home. Vanessa greeted us at the door, not with the polished perfection I'd grown accustomed to, but with flour on her cheek and obvious nervousness, I'm attempting to make your lasagna recipe. She confessed. It's not going well. The kitchen was a disaster zone of scattered ingredients and sauce splatters. I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, unexpected laugh that momentarily bridged the chasm between us. Let me help, I offered, rolling up my sleeves automatically. No. Vanessa's response was firm but gentle. You're not here to help or clean or fix anything. You're here as my guest. As my mother? She guided us to the living room where Charles waited with drinks already prepared. His greeting was warmer than usual, tinged with an awkwardness that suggested genuine regret. It's good to see you both, he said, meeting my eyes directly. It's been too long since we had family over. Family. The word hung in the air, simultaneously a peace offering and an acknowledgement of past wrongs. Dinner was a modest affair by their standards, and perfect lasagna, slightly overdone garlic bread, and a simple salad, but the conversation flowed more easily than it had in years. We talked about Jerem's upcoming retirement, about the community garden I'd helped start in our neighborhood. Normal family conversation, unmarred by the usual tension of class differences. As we finished our meal, Vanessa cleared her throat nervously. I have something to show you both. She disappeared into another room and returned carrying a large, wrapped rectangular object. I've been working on this for weeks. It's not finished yet. But she handed it to me. Open it. I unwrapped it carefully to find a handmade quilt, about half completed. Embedded in the fabric squares were photographs transferred onto cloth images, spanning decades of our lives together. Me holding newborn Vanessa, her first day of kindergarten, her high school graduation with me standing proudly beside her, her law school ceremony. But there were other images, to ones I'd never seen. Vanessa and me in what appeared to be recent digital creations, standing together at imagined future events, places and moments we hadn't shared but might still experience. I found all these old photos and albums at your house, she explained, the newer ones I had digitally created. It's a timeline of us past, present, and hopefully future. My fingers traced the careful stitching, feeling the hours of labor embedded in each square. You made this yourself. When did you learn to quilt? I've been taking classes at the community center near my office, 3 times a week during my lunch break. She smiled sheepishly. I'm not very good at it yet, but the instructor says I'm improving. The image of my corporate lawyer daughter sitting among retirement-age women learning to quilt during her precious lunch hour struck me as both absurd and deeply touching. Why? I asked. Simply, because you once told me that your mother taught you to quilt, and you always wished you had time to teach me. Her voice wavered. And because I wanted to create something with my hands, something that can't be bought, something that honors where I come from instead of hiding it. I looked up. My daughter really looked at her and saw for the first time in years the authentic person beneath the carefully constructed facade. In her imperfect stitches and flour-smudged cheeks was a vulnerability I'd thought long lost. But beautiful as the moment was, it didn't erase 20 years of erasure. One quilt couldn't patch the hole torn in our relationship by decades of denial. It's lovely, Vanessa, I said honestly. But we still have a long way to go. She nodded, accepting this truth. Without defensiveness, I know. That's why I wanted to tell you about next week. What's happening next week? Jerome asked. Vanessa exchanged a glance with Charles before answering. I've invited the partners from my firm and their spouses for dinner, a small gathering. And I'd like you both to come as my parents. No pretense, no hiding, just the truth. The invitation hung in the air between us, a test, perhaps, but also a genuine attempt at public amends. Are you sure? I asked. These are the same people you've been hiding me from for years. That's exactly why it needs to be them, she said firmly. I've already started the process. Last week, I told my assistant and paralegal the truth that my mother isn't a retired executive but a hardworking woman who cleaned houses to put me through school. That I've been lying out of misplaced shame, Charles added. And I've spoken to my parents. They were disappointed in both of us. But they've agreed to host a family dinner next month, all of us together. I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of the old fear, the terror of being exposed, of not belonging. It was still there in the tightness around her eyes, but it was overshadowed by something. Stronger determination. This won't be easy for you, I observed. No, she agreed. But it's necessary. For both of us. She reached across the table for my hand. I spent 20 years constructing a life that had no place for my mother. I want to spend the next 20 building one where you're at the center, where you belong. I didn't immediately accept or decline her invitation. Some wounds require more than words to heal, more than a single gesture to mend. But I recognized the courage it took for her to make the offer, to risk her carefully curated professional image for the sake of honesty and reconciliation. The dinner with her colleagues, the following week, proved to be a turning point, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. I wore a simple but elegant dress Jerome had insisted on buying me for the occasion. Vanessa introduced us straightforwardly, my parents, Gloria and Jerome Williams. There were moments of awkwardness. Of course, confused glances from those who had heard different stories about her background. Pointed questions about my career change from people who clearly remembered me as a cleaning woman. But there were also surprising moments of connection. A senior partner pulled me aside to tell me about his own mother, a hotel housekeeper who'd raised 3 children alone. Another guest shared that her grandfather had been a janitor, who insisted all his grandchildren get college educations. Most surprising was Margaret, Vanessa's mother-in-law, who arrived unexpectedly with a tray of homemade cookies. "I hope you don't mind me crashing," she said, embracing me with unexpected warmth. "Charles mentioned this gathering, and I wanted to be here to support both of you." Later, as the evening wound down, she confided in me. "I spent decades hiding my own background, the fact that my father was a factory worker, that I grew up in public housing. Charles doesn't even know." She smiled ruefully. "Watching you and Vanessa has made me reconsider many things." That night marked the beginning of a healing process, not its conclusion. In the months that followed, Vanessa and I rebuilt our relationship piece by piece. Sometimes we stumbled. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. She occasionally slipped into status anxiety. I sometimes wielded her past behavior as a weapon when hurt. But we kept trying. She joined Jerome and me for Sunday dinners at our modest home, no longer making excuses about the neighborhood or suggesting we meet at restaurants instead. I attended events at her firm, no longer as invisible help but as a welcome family member. The most profound change came 6 months later, when Vanessa was offered a prestigious position at her firm, a partnership that would cement her status in the legal community she'd been so desperate to impress. She turned it down. Instead, she accepted a role with the Legal Aid Society, representing clients who couldn't afford representation otherwise. The pay was significantly less, the prestige in conventional terms diminished. But when she spoke about her work, her eyes shone with a purpose I hadn't seen since she was a young law student. Determined to change the world, the partners were shocked. She told me over coffee one morning, Charles's parents even more so. "But for the first time in my career, I feel like I'm doing work that honors where I came from instead of running from it." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "You know what's ironic? My background growing up without much understanding how systems work against people without resources actually makes me better at this job than many of my colleagues from privileged backgrounds. The very thing I was hiding has become my strength." 2 years after that devastating moment when my daughter called me her maid, we sat together in my backyard on my 70th birthday. Jerome had organized a surprise gathering, neighbors, friends, family all crowded into our modest space. Vanessa had helped plan it, working alongside him in secret for weeks. As the celebration wound down, she presented me with another gift, a quilt, now completed. The final panel showed recent memories, our reconciliation, holidays spent together, ordinary moments reclaimed from the wreckage of our past. "It's not perfect," she said, running her hand over the occasionally uneven stitches. "I'm still learning. But I wanted you to have it finished." I wrapped the quilt around my shoulders, feeling the weight of our story in every square. "It's not supposed to be perfect," I told her. "Neither are we. But we're real now, and that's worth more." That evening, as guests departed, I overheard Vanessa speaking to a colleague from her new job who had asked about our story. "My mother," she said clearly, proudly, "is the strongest person I know. She cleaned houses for 20 years to give me opportunities she never had. Then I spent 20 years trying to erase that sacrifice, because I was afraid it made me less somehow." She glanced over at me, eyes shining. "It took almost losing her to realize it actually makes me more resilient, more compassionate, more human." In that moment, standing in my humble backyard with the homemade quilt around my shoulders, I felt a completion that had nothing to do with status or appearances. My daughter had finally understood what I had known all along, that dignity isn't determined by what you do for a living, but by how you live with what you do. The woman who had once been ashamed to introduce me as her mother now proclaimed her story as a badge of honor, not in a performative way that fetishized struggle, but in a manner that acknowledged the complex reality of class, sacrifice, and the true meaning of success. We will never get back the 20 years when she held me at arm's length, when she chose status over authenticity. That loss remains a scar between us. But in rebuilding our relationship, we've created something perhaps more valuable than an unbroken bond, a consciously mended one. Stronger at the broken places because we chose to repair it together. If this story resonated with you, please like, follow, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your authentic self or heal a broken relationship. Comment below if you've ever had to confront painful truths in your family. And remember that sometimes the most meaningful reconciliations Begin with the hardest conversations. Because while I may have spent 20 years cleaning my daughter's house, the most important cleaning we ever did was sweeping away the lies that had come between us.